She is the National Rural Teacher of the Year.
The best learning doesn't always need to come from a book or a test.
How is it being a teacher today? And I don't even just mean specifically with rural, but just being a teacher in the profession.
You know, so much of this generation has been plagued that they don't know they're not employable, they're buried in their phones. I like to debunk those myths. In my 6 out of 7 period day, students see about 75 professionals in the course of our full year together.
What would you say is that biggest misconception as a rural educator?
I think rural communities and any community that celebrate that are the ones that are thriving.
My guest today is Jenny Morris. She is the National Rural Teacher of the Year and a business teacher at Morris Area High School. All right, Jenny.
Hi, Cory.
You ready?
I'm so excited to be here. I'm ready. Are you?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. 2 small town kids.
Here we are.
Benson, Minnesota, right?
Benson, Minnesota. Our dairy farm, just about 20 minutes from Benson. That's where I kicked things off. So I've been rural since the very beginning.
Right.
Yep.
And then went to the big city in Fargo-Moorhead.
Big city. It felt huge, but you know, you think about Fargo-Moorhead, there's so much of that rural spirit everywhere, but it molds all of that kind of metro-urban vibe too. And to think, when I went there, my apartment overlooked a cornfield, and now there's like a whole nother town in South Moorhead. So I chased the big city, what felt like a big city, but really it was a pretty rural place.
It's all perspective, though. I mean, growing up in Perham, for me, Fargo-Moorhead was the big city.
Yeah.
But even like Fergus Falls, Detroit Lakes, they all felt really big. Like the Twin Cities felt just way too big, huge, enormous. But Fargo-Moorhead, as I got a little bit older, felt like the right size.
It did. And I still am drawn to going up to Fargo-Moorhead for fun and for business world type stuff. So yeah, I'm quick to get students there too.
Well,
so
and being the superstar that you are, the college, our alma mater, Concordia College, likes to have you back to talk to students.
They do. I was just there a week or two ago just talking about why rural would be an option for future educators, breaking down some of those stereotypes, if you will, and the rural buzz was alive and well with those 150 future educators. Certainly.
Okay, so you have 150 college students.
Yep.
You're speaking to them. You yourself are a rural teacher.
Yes.
What's your message to them?
Well, yeah, I first asked the question, what does rural mean to you? Because as I have done work in this rural space, it seems like everyone's got a slightly different answer. So it's kind of fun to pull those common themes. So I started there and just told the stories from my perspective, from an administrator's perspective, from a rural storyteller's perspective, and then what our industry says. You know, the school, while it's the epicenter of it seems like every community, certainly rural communities, it's that industry that backs it. You know, are there jobs for everyone else outside of that rural perspective? So I really tried to hone in on those different perspectives, and I think collectively, we've got a lot of future educators that want to come to rural areas. I found that out that morning, so it's pretty exciting.
What are they saying to you about it? Especially, I'm so curious at what people at that age, 18 to 22, think.
You know, so many of them are like, oh, I'm from a rural community. It feels just so good to talk to someone who chose to go back to a rural town. So I think that comfortability is there, and they know that, you know, We've gone to the big city, but it feels good to go home. And even at age 18, 19, and 20, they're like, you know, I'd want to raise my family in a small community. And so to just put down the roots right away, I was shocked that so many of them said that. Now, there's certainly folks who have big city dreams or very urban or, you know, metro populated areas that they want to go teach and be part of, but they like what we'd call the simple life of rural, but knowing that the world's actually a lot smaller than what everyone thinks it is, and there's access to just as much in a rural community as there is a large-scale one.
And that's amazing, too. I mean, we need great educators in rural places. We need them in urban places as well. And the thing that I think is really cool is that, you know, you can go to an urban area and teach, and there's always going to be a home out there for you, you know, when you're ready or if your life changes for you in that rural region.
Absolutely. You know, and as I speak about rural education especially, I never want to dismiss our friends in metro areas. I always suggest to them, go find that rural spirit, because it's alive and well in big communities. Even as I came off 494 today, there's a wildlife area just right here, right tucked by the Mall of America and the airport. So that's really exciting. And I think there's that rural spirits everywhere, whether it's on the city street or the apartment floor you live on, or certainly next to your neighboring teachers. So even if it's big city, go find that rural spirit, because it's there.
Let's hang on to this, because I want to circle back on this conversation.
Good.
But I want to learn more about you.
Okay.
So you're Benson, Minnesota, small town.
Very small town.
You go to Concordia College. Now, did you yourself at 22 say, I'm going back home, I want to be a teacher in a small town?
I did, yep. So, and to backtrack a bit, I got on a school bus at the end of my dairy farm driveway at age 5. And, I think I recall the stories and the pictures more than, in my 5-year-old mindset knowing, but I knew I wanted to be a teacher the moment I knew what teaching was. And so, I went through elementary, I'm going to be an elementary teacher. But then I really found my calling as a business student, being part of a business education program. I recall my business teacher making up classes, because she's like, if you're going to hang around this classroom, I got to have you busy. So they'd make up classes for me, and I quickly knew that my next step would be Concordia, because they offered business education as a major. And so, went to Concordia and knew that big city life was awesome. Like I said, I love going back to visit, but I knew I wanted to get back home. In fact, we bought our first house in Benson, and I commuted to Wilmer for just a time. And then as soon as there was that opening in our neighboring community, I knew that's what it felt right. So my husband had always been in Morris for his professional life, and so we knew this was our opportunity to get family all under one roof, so to speak, to live, work, and raise our family in Morris.
Yeah. Huh. We share that in common, in that both at a very young age knew exactly what we wanted to do. I honestly, I don't know what it would be like to not understand what you wanted to do.
Right.
At 8, I told my parents, I want to be a TV news anchor in Minneapolis. And that was it. I didn't have a backup plan. Right. It sounds like you're the same way. You're like, at
Absolutely.
5,
Yep.
I want to be a teacher.
Yep. I recall building my humble first classroom in the upstairs spare bedroom, and I felt so lucky, because one of my dear friends, his mom was actually a teacher, so we got to have the teacher books and the teacher attendance book,
So did you put your stuffies in the the desks?
Or we had Cabbage Patch Kids as our students, yes.
In the Care Bears probably were in there too.
Yes, absolutely. And now as a high school teacher, it's kind of neat to walk alongside families as they are trying to help their teenagers make those decisions. And it's okay if kids don't know what they want to be, but it's hard for me to wrap my head around it, because I knew education was always going to be my path.
It seems like you were very specific right away. You knew business. Why business?
I loved the practicality of it. It's ever changing, so career and technical education needs to mirror what the community that you teach in needs. So, it's the business practices, it's the digital media practices, that entrepreneurial spirit. And so I like teaching kids practicality, and as a student, I liked that, so I knew that I could convey that in a classroom too.
How is it being a teacher today? And I don't even just mean specifically with rural, but just being a teacher in the profession. How has it evolved since you've even been a teacher in Morris?
It seems like it's just going so fast. It seems like it's changing all the time. Needs are changing all the time. And what's pretty cool is we want to have inclusive classrooms. And so no matter what walk of life you come from, or maybe what your gifts or your struggles are, we want to keep you in classrooms as much as possible. And so just keeping up with that inclusive concept, and then beyond that, getting kids out of our schools as much as we can, immersing them in the communities, especially rural communities, to show them, here's what we have available, that the best learning doesn't always need to come from a book or a test. And I know as a teacher, there's the teacher just said she doesn't like books or tests, and that's true, because it goes back to teaching the practicality, and learning is messy, and learning can be outside. And so getting kids out and getting the community in is probably what's most important for me as a teacher.
And one thing I see in rural communities all the time too, that I think is very unique, and also just kind of shows the value that our rural communities have, is that tie into the school. So local businesses and some of the connections that are made with the school, that allow for experiential learning. I think that creates sort of this community atmosphere in those small towns. Is that something that you experience in Morris?
That is what at the heart of what I do. Students see, so in my 6 out of 7 period day, students see about 75 professionals in the course of our full year together. And that spans everything from our youngest learners that I teach that are 7th graders on up to our soon-to-be graduates. And so I think honing in, especially in a rural community, on leaning in on those industry professionals, that magic that maybe could have been in a textbook where we could go tour or see the manufacturing happening or seeing the cows being milked, like getting them out, and that's where the true learning happens. And I think what happens then is you also see those soft skills ramp up. You know, so much of this generation has been plagued that they don't know, they're not employable, they're buried in their phones. And so I like to debunk those myths, teach kids, here's how we welcome our guests, here's how we handshake. I actually have students lead anytime a guest comes or we go. I call them my student hosts. So they're the first off the bus. They go do that small talk. They go shake the hands, call the rest of us in, and then they really lead our trips out. And so I think going back to your question about how has education changed, I think it's important to find those inspirational leaders who can break down all the barriers and the myths that these kids aren't employable and they don't know how to behave in society. No, they do. They just got to be taught. So.
And I think we've gotten better at understanding, one, how kids learn, but then also not saying like, hey, here's what you absolutely need to do to be successful, and that is, you need to be able to sit in that chair, look straight at the board at the front, listen to the teacher, ace the test, go to college, go there for 4 years, and then get a job. That's great. Some kids learn like that. That's Absolutely. The path for some kids. But there's a successful path for many different kids that's totally different than that. That is that experiential learning. That may be a trade.
Yep, absolutely. And I think rural communities and any community that celebrate that are the ones that are thriving.
You mentioned something earlier. Okay, I'm going to jump in here because you mentioned something earlier, and you had mentioned the classroom. We want to be inviting. We want to be inclusive. Yep. Sometimes you don't hear that necessarily associated with rural America.
Right.
So how do you go about that? And or is that just a myth that is kind of pushed onto rural towns?
You know, Cory, the myth is out there. Even going back to working with college students 2 weeks ago, you know, I heard those rumblings. Oh, I would never go to rural. They're not very accepting, or they're very polarized in views. And I think it's the job of certainly the school to start to break some of those barriers and myths down. And so to be inclusive, to be outside of the school, seeing young adults representing the school and community, all of that is so important. And I have words from another Minnesota guy, Brian Skavnak. He's known as Be the Nice Kid. And his message is so simple that some kids are better at sports than you, some kids have cooler clothes than you. It doesn't matter. You have your thing too. Be the kid who can get along. Be the kid, and I'm paraphrasing, of course, but he ends with be the nice kid. And I have a giant sign in my classroom that welcomes every kid, every walk of life, every day. And I remind them of that. And my teacher heart skips a beat when I hear them, hey, remember, we got to be the nice kid here. So that goes back to that inclusive, welcoming environment. And a lot of times I'll say those words and replace kid with adult. Be the adult who can get along. Be the adult who does the right thing. Be the nice adult. And so they know that when they come to my space, they are welcomed and loved beyond measure, and I'm going to share them with whoever I can to say that these kids are moving and shaking, no matter who they are, no matter what walk of life they are.
So that's our purpose with My Town, is that there are all these misconceptions about the rural lifestyle.
Yes.
And these are long-standing negative narratives that are attached to the rural lifestyle. It's been going on for decades. And so people who may live in an urban area have these thoughts of what it's like to go and be there, to be a teacher there, to live there. Mm-hmm. And they say, well, all I hear about it, rural towns, is that, there's something negative about it. It's declining, despair, job loss, not welcoming, uneducated, all of those things. And that's really our purpose with My Town. So from your perspective, What would you say is that biggest misconception about either your school, your job as a rural educator?
I often talk about kids are surprised that we're not a rear view mirror town. Kids want to come back. But I think that lands on our community leaders and certainly teachers to break that barrier down. Like, it's okay to come back. It's okay to go explore, but we're not, to try to teach rural communities that don't let them just see you in the rearview mirror and they never come back. I think a lot of it goes into that there are jobs available. They are ever changing. I think about how many remote workers we have right now. You can work remotely from your family farm and still have a very global influence, which is pretty cool. So I think breaking down the misconceptions that there are no opportunities. There are if you go find them. Or if you create them. That's the really exciting thing. And so we'll have seniors in our senior class head right into the workforce because they've been preparing for years in school for it. We have seniors who are going on entrepreneurial adventures, certainly 1, 2, 4+ years of further education. But even then, they have it in their mind, much like I did. They want to come back. And so I think it's just shifting those stigmas that it's better somewhere else, or what I like to say, the grass is greener where you water it. So I like to give kids the watering can or the hose and to just know that there are opportunities here, but if I weren't bringing them out 75 times, maybe they wouldn't see that. And so then beyond that, we're breaking down the stigma that kids don't know how to act. No, they do. Like, those kids walked off the bus and shook my hand, And so I think it's equally as important for rural communities to see that teenagers have a place, and let's grow them to want to come back.
Yeah.
So those are things I work on every single day, and it's as simple as, here's the watering can. Like, let's grow this grass.
One really important thing you hit on earlier that I think is really important too is just the way you speak about the community in Morris.
Yeah.
And I see this in a lot of different rural communities too, where you're building relationships. And I think to my experience growing up in Perham, and I can name my kindergarten, first, second, third, fourth, all the way through, all my teachers. In fact, my kindergarten teacher, who retired the year after I left, when she saw me pop up in the news here at KARE 11 back in 2015, wrote my parents a letter back at home and said, how wonderful to see my K student. She was 90 years old because you never forget. And that's what I think is important too, is that your job as a rural educator, you are helping build those relationships, not only with the students, but helping students bridge the gap within the community, meeting those business leaders, showing the opportunities here in town too, and showing the value that we all bring to each other here in this town.
It's pretty cool. And that letter, to think of a 90-year-old kindergarten teacher now seeing you live out your 8-year-old dream, that's the rural spirit. And again, that can be found anywhere, but that's the rural spirit that goes, wow, like years later, decades later, like that's impressive.
And then wanting to write a handwritten letter to my mom and dad saying how proud she was.
Yep.
I still get choked up because she meant so much, and it was such a reconnection then 30 years later, having not seen her. But that's to me is the epitome of what it's like to grow up in a rural town, is that we cheer for each other. We champion each other.
Yes.
The kid who graduated from high school in our town that goes off to do something, even if they're not here, we're excited about them. We're cheering them on, and they always have a home here. And that's something that I certainly feel in my hometown, and I would imagine you too.
Absolutely. And it's pretty cool to be just 1 or 2 counties away from truly my hometown. I mean, I can be out to my parents' farm within 20 minutes, and that's important for me, for my husband and I, that our kids feel that connection to our past as well. So
opportunities. You talked about opportunities in a small town. I think that to me is the greatest misconception. That's the thing that we talk about all the time in my town, is that there is this myth that, well, there's nothing out there for you, when in fact, there's a lot of opportunities. And I actually think right now is a perfect time for rural communities to be raising their hand and saying like, hey, actually, we have everything that you're searching for, because what you're after is you want a good job, you want a good school district, you want a place where you can balance that work and life. Guess what we have? We have it right here.
It's neat to see, and it's neat to have a front row seat to all of that. I think again, using that school as the epicenter of the community, we're constantly being watched and analyzed, and how cool that we can help tell that story, and champion those students who come back are out doing great things. And it's really neat because we have some pretty big industries in Morris, manufacturing, we have a world-renowned dairy, among many, many other things. Great hospital, shops are opening instead of closing their doors. And to be able to then have students part of that story, and I don't know, it's really cool to watch day in and day out.
People don't usually associate technology with rural towns, but you're teaching it, you're living it.
Yes.
These kids they're after it.
They are. I think as the weather gets warmer, we'll be flying drones all over town and doing little promos for things. We're doing things like podcasting and videography, and what's really cool about that is then those students want to go bring life to, say, a history project or bring a novel to life through all of this technology as well. And what's neat about all of that, although it costs money, there's so many grant dollars out there too. If I'm willing to pull up my shirt sleeves and find the dollars, and with that, I oftentimes will bring students with. So as we look for cool new shiny toys, I look at it, let's not look at it as a toy, but a tool, and have the students part of that. And then they say, well, so many of them started in my digital media class and now are part of the marketing department and the drone pilot at one of the big industries in town. So not only have they decided to come back, but they're building on those cool gadgets and tools that they learned about in high school.
What's it like to see students that you taught go off into the world, do cool things? Maybe they come back, maybe they don't,
Sure.
but just do cool things.
That interconnectedness is so fun. Then I get to be a professional acquaintance of theirs, and I'm oftentimes like, let's meet for coffee, and I want to hear about all the amazing things you're doing. So keeping connected, I think, is really important, and I think that's, again, what keeps those rural communities alive and well. And many of them do come back. It's really cool.
And why are they coming back? Like, what do they tell you?
It's nostalgic. It feels like home. It's that multi-generation. Like, they want their kids to know their great-grandparents who live down the street, but they also know that they can not only be part of industry, but create it. I think of one of my former students who just created her own job title within the industry that she'd worked because she saw a niche and said, hey, let's add this to our bag of tricks. And so now she's the educational liaison for a huge manufacturing company, telling everybody, every student about them, and visiting them at school and inviting them in the industry. And she thought, I'm here to stay, and what can I do to continually grow? So there's opportunity for growth. You just got to be creative.
The interaction with the community, and I kind of want to get back on that, but the interaction between the school and the community, does the school get a lot of support from the community, its businesses, the city council, stuff like that?
It's amazing. You bring up the city council. They actually come do a meeting every year in the school so the students can watch it. We're doing a polar plunge coming up. The students have a very lofty goal. They'll not only meet it, they'll crush it and exceed it. We just had probably one of the coolest events happen. It's part of our unified club, going back to that inclusive approach. That takes a traditional Phi-Ed class and partners it with students of a variety of disabilities with a general ed student. They have a floor hockey tournament, floor hockey showcase. They're standing room only in the gym. There's not a dry eye in the room to celebrate just the simple idea of being inclusive. It is so community backed. We have the students actually play an alumni community team. And that group of people come with a variety of abilities and disabilities. And it is in the namesake of a former paraprofessional who we lost way too soon, but her family drops the puck, let's play hockey. And it's just a celebration of not only our school, but our community. And it, like I said, standing room only, not a dry eye in the room. And it is just such a celebration. So the community is our biggest cheerleader as a school. And that ripple effect, when we start thinking about needing money or passing referendums. It's that multi-generation of Morris Tiger spirit that's just alive and well. Mm-hmm. From what feels like maybe a little event actually has this dynamic ripple effect.
I would say too that the community kind of has to, right? Like, I mean, there are, whether it's urban, small town, wherever, if that community at large is not supportive of the school, I mean, there's going to be problems there, because I think the school is such a hub in terms of attracting people to an area.
Yep. And, for me, and it's so fun to teach others how to do this, you build this wealth of professionals in the network. And just yesterday, I had a phone conversation and gave 20 different names to a teacher who wanted to take a leap of faith and involve the community in her classrooms. It just creates this just powerhouse of, laying the foundation for unshakable ground that, when the community needs something, the school steps up, and vice versa. When the school needs something, the community's there. Mm-hmm. So it's not there's the saying, Rome wasn't built in a day. They were laying bricks every hour. And sometimes I feel like we're living Rome, because we'll have these big brainstorm ideas, and then all of a sudden within a week we're bringing it to life, because we have this vibrant community of multi-generations and young professionals who are like, yes, let's do what's good for kids in terms of the school.
You are the National Rural Teacher of the Year.
I am.
How did that happen? How did you find out? I assume when you were 5 teaching the Care Bears that was not necessarily on your mind, but how did that happen?
It takes a lot of tenacious spirit, zest, being a little bit crazier than the crazies. Backtrack probably about 5 years ago, I was nominated for a Minnesota Rural Education Educator of Excellence Award. Okay, so I was honored at a state level. They threw my name into a national arena, and after a whole bunch of Zoom interviews and just being myself, I get a call saying, we want to ask you to be the 2023 National Rural Teacher of the Year.
Did you think about it?
I was like, yes, sign me up. What do I need to do next? And I really felt like with the award came responsibility. And what that did is open these doors that I didn't even know existed about rural advocacy, rural education advocacy, and just telling the stories and being a champion for everything rural. And what it did was allowed me to help answer the question, what does rural mean to you, on a broader scale? I remember meeting a former National Rural Teacher of the Year who still taught in a one-room schoolhouse with all the modern-day bells and whistles, but just with the remote location. A modern-day rural one-room schoolhouse teacher. Think about that. That's crazy. What's super exciting for Minnesota, we had back-to-back winners. So a now professional friend of mine who hails from the North Shore is representing special education in that national rural education arena. So what it has done is just opened up so many more doors for networking and just telling the simple story of what are where the blacktop ends, and just talking about everything rural. And I think about this, like the story of like, what is my story, and what does my rural postcard look like and say? It doesn't have to say hello from the Big Apple or Viva Las Vegas. It's a picture of my school with a cattle pasture in front of it, and just the fog lifting over the Pomme de Terre River, and just going to tell those stories, and more so being an advocate for it's okay to go to rural. In fact, look at all the opportunities. Dear mom and dad, this is what's happening in our rural school today. And so as I've gone from a Minnesota winner onto a national winner, it's been really fun to meet all walks of life who all share a common theme of we love rural. And what's neat about the Minnesota and now the National Rural Education Association, it's all the stakeholders. It's teachers, it's administrators, it's school board members, it's all of the stakeholders all at the same table instead of just talking to teachers or just talking to admin. And it's a rare beast in the fact that we all care about kids, we all do, But to bring all of those players to the table and have a seat at that table is pretty exciting.
Yeah, so what's it been like day to day? I mean, has it changed your life at all? Like from day to day? I mean, you're still obviously a business teacher at Morris, but like from the day to day, being that rural advocate, helping people understand what it's like to be a rural educator and even rural students in those rural communities, has it changed for you at all?
Well, I'm visiting with you
Yeah,
today,
you're here today, yeah.
and I'm hoping my sub plans are going okay. No, they are. And that's what's really cool. Upon receiving both the Minnesota and the national recognition, I made a promise to myself that I wouldn't forget about my roots and I wouldn't forget about the four walls of my classroom. So I always had to take care of my family, those roots, in that classroom. I oftentimes get to tell personal student stories, which is really, really cool. I ask them for advice all the time. All right, I'm going on a podcast tomorrow. What advice do you have? Just be yourself, Mrs. Mars. Just be your crazy self, and it will be just fine. So, you know, that honest, vulnerable voice of a student has been pretty cool. As far as advocacy, you know, I love going to tell the story. You know, I get to tell our Morris story, and it's amazing how many people have that connection to, you know, they know so-and-so, or that lady down the street, they know them too. And again, it's uncovering that rural spirit, one rural postcard at a time.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you what you ask other people. What does rural mean to you?
It's a feeling. You know, maybe that feeling is 3-4 generations deep. Maybe it's just that cultural feeling that comes with knowing everybody. You know, it's that blessing and a curse. You know, you can't hide in a small town, but yet that's so special too. So it's that rural feeling that it's quiet, and it's okay if it's not quiet. It's okay that we might be filled with cornfields and cattle or babbling brooks or a beautiful lake, but the world is still right there. You know, we're one click away from so much. And so that feeling of just being at peace with the quiet.
Well, rural is proud of you.
Thank you.
Proud to have you as an advocate, and I know Morris is as well. So is the state of Minnesota. So thank you, Jenny.
Yeah. Thank you. This was fun. Let's do it again.
Yeah.